At the airport, I was told my ticket was canceled. My family boarded without even looking back. That night, my sister texted, "You should be used to being left out by now." I just replied, "Don't worry, your new year will be unforgettable." When they came back, their phones lit up with alerts. After that, their lives began to fall apart. The gate agent at Denver International handed back my passport with a tight, apologetic smile. She explained the situation in a hushed, practiced voice, the kind reserved for passengers causing a public scene. Except I was not causing a scene. I was completely frozen. My sister transferred my first-class seats to her new boyfriend and his buddy. I stood there gripping my 8-year-old daughter's hand. The boarding line pushed past us. The smell of stale airport coffee and anxious sweat filled the terminal. Up ahead on the glass-walled jet bridge, Violet turned around. She locked eyes with me. Her lips curled upward into a slow, deliberate smirk. Madeline's fingers went slack. Her stuffed bear hit the airport carpet with a soft thud. Andrew marched right behind Violet. He wore his expensive leather jacket, the one I helped him pay for last Christmas. He lifted his heavy boot, stepped directly over my daughter's toy, and kept walking. He never even turned his head. My parents followed right behind him, their heads down completely, ignoring the fact that their oldest daughter and granddaughter were stranded at the gate. My phone vibrated in the pocket of my wool coat. A text from Violet. "Seeing you two looking pathetic at security was hilarious. Bringing you would ruin the luxury vibe. Thanks for the $3,500 deposit, though. Take your brat home and learn your place." I stared at the glowing screen. My jaw locked so hard my teeth ached. My mind went completely terrifyingly cold. They wanted me to learn my place. I squeezed Madeline's hand, picked up her bear, and pulled her away from the crowded gate. It was time to teach them theirs. The rideshare back to my apartment was suffocatingly silent. Rain streaked down the windows of the vehicle, blurring the neon lights of the highway into long, smeared lines of color. Madeline fell asleep against my arm, her small chest rising and falling in a slow rhythm. I carried her into her bedroom, tucked the heavy wool blanket under her chin, and walked straight to the kitchen table. I flipped my laptop open. The screen illuminated the dark room, casting sharp shadows against the walls. I spend 40 hours a week as a high school counselor breaking up fights, untangling teenage drama, and dealing with entitled bullies who think the world owes them everything. I am 34 years old, and it took standing in Terminal B for me to finally realize the most vicious bullies I ever faced were the ones sharing my exact last name. The red flags were always waving right in my face. I just chose to paint them white. Our entire family dynamic was built on a very specific unspoken hierarchy. Violet was the golden child, the beautiful, charismatic center of attention who could do absolutely no wrong. Andrew was the helpless baby brother, constantly needing to be rescued, and I was the beast of burden, the shock absorber, the human safety net. Whenever Violet overdrew her bank account to buy designer clothes, I was the one our parents called to cover her rent. Whenever Andrew crashed his car, I was the one who paid the deductible. I was expected to sacrifice my own comfort, my own savings, and my own peace of mind to maintain their illusions of success. Just 2 weeks ago, I stayed up until 3 in the morning, baking a massive 3-tier cake from scratch for our mother's birthday. I bought the expensive silk scarf she had been hinting about for months. Violet showed up 2 hours late to the party carrying nothing but her designer purse and a fresh blowout. She snatched the gift box right out of my hands. She immediately posed for a selfie with the cake, claiming to her thousands of followers that she spent all night making it. When I stepped into the edge of the family photo, she jammed her sharp elbow directly into my ribs and shoved me entirely out of the frame. "Look at yourself, Vanessa," she hissed under her breath. "Dressed like a janitor, you will just ruin my feed. Hiding your face is doing you a favor." My throat burned back then. I swallowed the thick knot of humiliation just to keep the peace. But tonight, sitting in the cold glow of my screen, that memory transformed. It was pure, high-octane fuel. I was not keeping the peace anymore. The true breaking point, the moment the final thread snapped, happened the night before our flight. Violet barged into my apartment demanding Madeline and I sleep on the broken pull-out couch in Aspen so her brand-new snobby boyfriend could take the master suite. The very suite I paid the deposit for. I told her absolutely not. Her face twisted into an ugly, unrecognizable snarl. She lunged across my kitchen island. Her sharp, manicured nails dug deep into my forearm, breaking the skin. She shoved me backward with all her weight. My shoulder slammed into the sharp edge of the granite counter. A stack of ceramic dinner plates crashed to the floor, shattering into 100 jagged pieces. Madeline shrieked in terror, pressing her small hands tightly over her ears. Violet stood over me, her eyes wild and furious. "Stop playing the victim. I barely touched you. No wonder your ex-husband ran away and left you with this burden." Andrew stood leaning against the doorframe the entire time. My own brother just chewed his gum and rolled his eyes. "Come on, Vanessa, just let her have it. You know how she gets. If you argue, you bring it on yourself." My parents sat in the living room staring at the television, pretending they could not hear the glass shattering in the kitchen. They thought my silence was weakness. They mistook my endless patience for submission. But as the login screen for my bank account popped up, my hands were perfectly steady. I was just measuring them for their coffins. I spent years acting as their human shield, absorbing their toxic outbursts, so our parents did not have to deal with the mess. I funded their emergencies, paid their deposits, and swallowed their poison. I stared at the joint emergency savings account holding $15,000. Money I scraped together over years of overtime and skipped lunches. Money they treated like an endless magical checking account. The cursor hovered over the transfer button. The hesitation was completely gone. I could have just canceled my credit cards right then and there. I could have stranded them at the airport or left them begging at the rental counter. But that was too easy. That would just make me the bitter, jealous sister who threw a tantrum. Violet would spin the story, play the victim, and Andrew would nod along, comforting her. I needed something far more permanent. I needed a masterpiece. I needed to hand Violet a rope and watch her tie the absolute perfect knot herself. I picked up my phone and dialed the Aspen property manager. The dial tone hummed against my ear. When he answered, I kept my voice bright, upbeat, and perfectly cheerful. I told him we wanted to surprise my sister for her big arrival. I requested the absolute top-tier VIP upgrade package, the works. The private chef for every evening meal, the chilled vintage champagne waiting on the Marble Island, the daily private snowmobile rentals, and the luxury spa access. In under 3 minutes, I completely quadrupled the final bill. Then came the beautiful, fatal detail. I opened my email and drafted a formal binding message to the host. I stated clearly that my travel plans had changed. I formally removed my name from the rental agreement and authorized a full transfer of primary liability. I instructed the host to present the new contract directly to Violet the second she walked through the front door. I closed my laptop. The apartment was completely beautifully silent. I made a cup of black coffee and stood by the window watching the streetlights flicker on in the cold air. I knew my sister's psychology better than she knew herself. I knew exactly how it would play out. Violet would stride into that multi-million-dollar cabin, see the crystal flutes and the blazing fireplace, and her ego would swallow her whole. Her snobby boyfriend would look at her like she was old money. She would crave total ownership of that aesthetic. When the host handed her a clipboard with the liability transfer, she would ignore the fine print. She would wave away any questions. She would just sign her name with a dramatic flourish, desperate to look like a careless high roller holding the purse strings in front of her new man. 2 hours later, my phone screen illuminated the dark kitchen counter. A new email from the property manager. Attached was a scanned PDF document. One glance at the screen confirmed it. Violet's looping, arrogant signature sat perfectly on the bottom line. The financial burden was entirely hers, legally binding, irrevocable. I opened my banking portal. The joint emergency account loaded on the screen. $15,000. The money I saved while they bought designer clothes. The money I managed while they maxed out their limits. My finger rested on the trackpad. I dragged the entire balance into a new secure account under my name alone. One click. The screen refreshed. Balance 0. I moved to the credit cards next. The ones linked to their mobile wallets. The ones they used for their daily lattes, gas, and ride shares. Blocked, frozen, deactivated. One by one, I severed the financial arteries that kept their fake glamorous lives pumping. I logged into our shared family cellular plan. I suspended every single line except mine. I locked them out of the streaming services. I cut the auto pay on my parents' car insurance. I leaned back in my chair. The massive, suffocating weight in my chest, the invisible boulder I carried for a decade, simply vanished. My shoulders dropped. The air in my kitchen felt incredibly light and crisp. Violet wanted to be the undisputed queen of the castle. Now she was. She just did not realize the castle was built on a frozen lake, and I had just taken a sledgehammer to the ice. The first crack in her porcelain mask happened right in the middle of a 5-star dinner. My phone vibrated violently against the nightstand, sliding across the polished wood. 12 missed calls from Violet. A rapid-fire stream of aggressive text messages flooded my lock screen. "You crazy witch. The card declined at the steakhouse. It declined twice in front of him. Turn the accounts back on right now. You were born to serve this family. Unlock them or I will call the cops for theft." I read the words. A slow, heavy satisfaction settled into my bones. I swiped the notification away and tossed the phone onto my mattress. I left her entirely on red. I pictured her sitting at that candlelit table, the waiter hovering with the leather billfold, the entire dining room turning to look at the commotion. I pictured her wealthy new boyfriend staring at her with rising suspicion, wondering why the woman who supposedly rented a luxury chalet could not afford a $300 dinner. The next morning, at exactly 9 o'clock, the situation escalated from embarrassing to critical. The Aspen host ran the secondary charges for the VIP upgrades. They bounced. The system automatically flagged the account for fraud. He immediately disabled the cabin's electronic smart locks and shut off the central heating. My phone rang again. Andrew's name flashed. I answered on the third ring. "Vanessa, you are insane," he screamed directly into the speaker, his voice cracked with sheer panic. "Mom and Dad are freezing on the porch. We cannot get back inside. Are you so jealous of Violet that you have lost your mind? Pay the bill right now." He still expected me to keep the peace. He expected me to fix the mess just like I always did. I pulled up the PDF of the liability waiver. I forwarded the document directly to our family group chat. I typed one single sentence. "The hotel called the sheriff. Enjoy the trip." I hung up. By noon, the real show started. Andrew, in a state of absolute terror, accidentally started a live video feed on his social media while trying to dial out for help. The notification popped up on my screen. I clicked it immediately. Violet stood in the center of the frame. Her public facade was completely shattered. Her expensive mascara ran down her cheeks in thick, dark streaks. Sweat beaded on her forehead despite the freezing temperature. She clutched the boyfriend's arm, begging him to listen. He violently yanked his arm away. He looked her up and down with absolute, unfiltered disgust. "You are a pathetic, broke grifter," he spat. He threw his leather duffel bag into the trunk of a waiting luxury town car. The heavy door slammed shut. The tires spun in the slush, leaving Violet choking on the exhaust fumes. She opened her mouth to scream, but another vehicle pulled into the driveway, a massive county cruiser. The sheriff stepped out, adjusting his heavy utility belt. He held a clipboard tight against his chest. He loudly informed the entire group they were trespassing and committing theft of services. The wealthy neighbors from the adjacent luxury cabins stepped out onto their massive wooden decks. They pointed down at the driveway, whispering behind gloved hands. Violet gasped for air. Her chest heaved. Her wide, frantic eyes darted toward the crowd of onlookers. The elite audience she desperately wanted to impress was now watching her public execution. Her fake identity burned to ash right in front of them. The sheriff pointed firmly toward the street, ordering them off the property. The ultimate influencer was reduced to a crying squatter dragging her suitcase through the freezing mud. By sunset, a shaky cell phone video hit our hometown community boards. An Aspen local filmed the entire eviction from their balcony. The thumbnail showed Violet dragging her massive suitcase through dirty slush, a sheriff's deputy pointing firmly toward the main road. The caption read, "Fake influencers busted for fraud." The comments were merciless. The church group, the high school alumni, the neighbors, everyone. Violet constantly bragged to watch her public ruin. Andrew and my parents were clearly visible in the background of the video, shivering in their thin designer coats, completely exposed as accomplices to her grift. Violet signed that liability waiver with her own hand. The massive resort debt belonged completely to her. Bankruptcy was her new aesthetic, and my parents had zero emergency funds left to bail her out. 1,000 miles away, the mountain air in Lake Tahoe was crisp and clean. Steam rolled off the surface of our private cedar hot tub, cutting through the freezing twilight. Madeline leaned her head against the edge, giggling as heavy snowflakes landed on her nose. She splashed the warm water, her smile completely untouched by the chaos a state away. I paid for this luxury cabin, this steaming water, this exact moment with money I earned and protected. No shared accounts. No secret subsidies. No serving anyone else. My phone vibrated on the dry wooden deck. Violet's name flashed across the screen. A desperate trailing text preview begged for a wire transfer. I picked up the device. I tapped the block button on her contact. I confirmed it. I did the exact same thing for Andrew. Then my parents. The contacts vanished into a locked folder. The screen went black. The digital bridge burned to the ground, taking a lifetime of manipulation with it. I slid back into the hot water and wrapped my arm around my daughter's shoulders. The silence that settled over the mountains was the beautiful, quiet warmth of a fire built entirely from the wreckage. Total, absolute peace. The fallout from Aspen did not just fade into the background like a bad memory. It hit them with the crushing, unavoidable weight of a legal avalanche. Because Violet signed that liability transfer with her own arrogant hand, the property management company did not hesitate to draw blood. They filed a massive civil lawsuit in county court for fraud and intentional non-payment. The judge ruled entirely in the resort's favor. Violet was legally ordered to pay $22,800 in combined luxury fees, property damages, and punitive penalties for the theft of services. She did not have a fraction of that amount. My parents had no emergency fund left to drain to save her. The court authorized aggressive wage garnishment, stripping her paychecks bare. Her credit score was completely obliterated. A few weeks later, the repo men showed up in the middle of the night to tow away her leased luxury SUV. But the social ruin cut her much deeper than the financial collapse. The viral eviction video permanently stripped her of her fake, curated aesthetic. The wealthy women in her exclusive church group suddenly stopped returning her calls. The neighbors stopped waving. She became a permanent cautionary tale in our hometown. People whispered in the grocery store aisles, pointing at the grifter who tried to fake her way into high society and ended up standing in the freezing mud with ruined makeup. 6 months after the trip, a thick envelope appeared in my mailbox. I recognized Andrew's sloppy handwriting immediately. He was playing the flying monkey, delivering the final, desperate manipulation attempt. I stood by the kitchen island, tracing the edge of the paper. Inside was a long, rambling letter. He wrote that Mom was suffering from terrible anxiety and high blood pressure. He wrote that Violet was under too much stress from the legal bills and needed her family to survive. He used all the classic, predictable hits. We are still blood. You need to forgive and forget. You are tearing this family apart over a tiny misunderstanding. We just want things back to normal. He wanted his human shield back. 2 days later, my phone caught a voicemail from an unknown number. It was my mother, her voice trembling, weeping into the receiver about how cold I had become. My pulse did not rise. My hands did not shake. I did not feel a single spark of anger, guilt, or obligation. I just felt profoundly, beautifully indifferent. I did not read the second page of the letter. I did not listen to the second half of the voicemail. I hit delete on the audio file. Then I walked the letter over to the paper shredder, fed it through the metal teeth, and listened to the satisfying mechanical hum as their toxic demands were reduced to confetti. That evening, my kitchen was full of noise. Not the chaotic, demanding noise of my past, but the warm, brilliant sound of genuine connection. I was hosting a dinner for my real family, my closest friends. People who actually brought wine, helped chop the vegetables, and laughed until their sides ached. Madeline sat at the center of the wooden table, proudly showing off her school art project to my best friend, who listened to every word with genuine, undivided attention. No one was competing for the spotlight. No one was secretly keeping score or manipulating the conversation. No one was demanding to be served while offering nothing in return. For my entire life, I thought love meant exhausting myself to keep everyone else afloat. I thought it meant proving my worth through constant sacrifice. Looking around my brightly lit table, listening to the sound of my daughter's unrestrained laughter, I realized the truth. Real love is simply supposed to be a safe place to land. If you are listening to this right now, and you feel a heavy, familiar knot in your chest, I need you to pay very close attention. Narcissists and their enablers are not just difficult people. They are emotional parasites. They groom you from day one to believe that your only value is your utility. They condition you to act as a human shock absorber for their failures, convincing you that setting a boundary is an act of betrayal. You spend your entire life trying to earn a love that they are completely incapable of giving. I learned 3 vital rules when I finally dropped the rope, and you need to hear them. Rule number 1. Blood does not demand loyalty, respect does. Sharing a last name is just a biological accident. It is absolutely not a binding lifelong contract to endure abuse. If your family only loves you for the problems you solve and the bills you pay, you are an employee, not a daughter, and certainly not a sister. You have the right to hand in your resignation. You are not obligated to finance the people who break you down just because you share genetics. Love is an action, not an entitlement. Rule number 2. The enabler is the abuser's bodyguard. Never ever trust the person who tells you to just keep the peace. The peacemakers like my brother are the most dangerous ones in the room. They use your empathy as a weapon against you. They demand that you absorb the abuse quietly, simply, so they do not have to be inconvenienced by the conflict. They will gladly watch you bleed out as long as it keeps the boat from rocking. Enablers do not want peace. They want compliance. The moment you stop complying, they will turn on you just as fast as the abuser did. Rule number 3. The best revenge is a mirrored reflection. You do not have to go to war with toxic people. You do not have to scream or explain your boundaries or beg for basic human decency from people committed to misunderstanding you. Just remove the safety net you built for them. Step back. Watch gravity and their own crippling incompetence do the work. The moment you stop saving them from themselves, their entire fake reality collapses. They survive on your grace. Take it away, and they are left with nothing but their own reflections. Are you currently acting as the silent safety net for someone else's toxic behavior? What would happen to their life tomorrow if you simply stopped? Take a hard look at the people you are exhausted from carrying. Let me know in the comments below. Remember, you are allowed to walk away from people who hurt you, even if you share a last name. Trust is earned, not owed. Never set yourself on fire to keep ungrateful people warm. I am Vanessa Myers, and I am finally free.